We are live here in Projectland. Welcome to Projectland, everybody. We are talking today with AI expert John Hack. And not only isn't he an AI expert, but he's been working on projects for a long time. So hi, John. How you feeling on this Friday?
Good, Dawn.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to. This is a fun topic, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Dawn, you went on mute.
Okay. If you are new to Projectland, don't worry. We are your tour guides through Projectland, and today especially we'll be talking about artificial intelligence, which is a very hot topic. And if you're new to Projectland, the reason why we call it Projectland is because projects are very, very different than operations, otherwise known as business as usual. So there are different rules and there are different expectations in Projectland, and project managers are leaders in Projectland. And John and I have both certainly led many, many projects in Projectland. And so we are excited to share with you some thoughts about artificial intelligence, get you ready for the future, and all kinds of fun conversation together. So I'm your host today, Dawn Mahan. I am the founder and CEO of PMOtraining and our brand new divisions, the Project Guru Academy and the Project Gurus. I am working on a book. So last night, some of you may have been with me for my manuscript reading. That's an insider event. You're welcome to sign up on our Contact Us page, PMOtraining.com, Contact Us page for our newsletter and get invited to those insider events. If you're a PMP, you can get free PDUs for that and get your name in my upcoming book. I am tracking for 100 contributors to the book from all industries, different countries, all different perspectives. So from brand new to projects to seasoned PMPs and more. So please consider joining me for our next session, which will be next month, and get your name in a book and have a fun night with some insiders. I also have a new Udemy course out, and I'll share with you a little bit more about that. So if you are new to Projectland, it's a great way to get started with smart tips, which are only 5 minutes of a piece for videos. So for me, being very verbose, it took a long time to condense 20 years of experience into 5-minute chunks. So, but that's just a little bit about me. Let's talk about John, who is our guest expert today. So he is an AI project guru. He ran SAP's Performance Management Innovation Lab. So anybody likes to talk about innovation, John's your guy. He's had multiple startup successes in analytics and business systems. He's been a regular guest speaker on disruptive innovation at Rutgers, and he's the co-founder of Interflection. So please, please, please follow Interflection on LinkedIn today for more news about that. And he's been from a very little known school called MIT. And NYU as well. So John, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to get started with just some lively discussion, which you and I have quite a bit, which is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And, when Dawn reached out to me, I was, very intrigued at the idea of talking about AI and projects. And, that's a big area. But I thought it would make sense to start with, what is AI, and not try to give a long tutorial about, all the things going on in AI. If you know AI, I won't waste much of your time, maybe a couple of minutes. If you don't, I think this is a good framework as a project manager for thinking about AI. So the phrase that I like is cognitive automation. AI takes some cognitive skill and mimics it in a computer. And that's really, broadly speaking, what AI is doing in the context of a project. It's automating something that normally requires human thought. That could be, reading a loan application and deciding whether it should be, discarded or moved down the chain in the process of approval. It could be looking for errors in a document, that sort of thing. Broadly speaking, there are two kinds of AI in the way that it's implemented. Expert systems, and those are hand-coded rules on how something gets done. And there's machine learning, which is the most popular and gets most of the press these days, where you feed a huge amount of data into the computer, and it looks for patterns and uses those patterns to make predictions or to categorize information. So what you're going to see a lot more of in the future are hybrid models that combine these. And a good example is Alexa. When you tell Alexa that, you want to listen to, WFUV on the radio, it's using machine learning models to convert your speech to text, but it's using rules to look for keywords that tell it what it should do. So in most of these systems, they are combining these two technologies. The one thing I would say is that obviously the technology can become very complex. You need to have someone on your team you really trust who knows this stuff, and that's a key piece of putting together the team. By the way, I do think we have comments open in the LinkedIn, on the LinkedIn page. So if you want to ask any questions as we go along, please do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, just so we can get the conversation started, please let us know where you're joining us from today. That's always fun to find out where everybody is and what your questions are. So we'd love to take some questions live. Let us know what questions you have, and we will try to take your questions live. And our producer, Ricardo, jump in later on when we ask for questions. If I miss any, please. And thank you. So AI is basically trying to make a computer like a human brain. Is that it?
Right. And, it's kind of funny because that's basically what computers have been doing all along.
Absolutely.
And, the definition of what qualifies as true AI has evolved over the years, right? Originally, it was thought, boy, if a computer could play checkers, that would be like real intelligence. And of course, that happened very early on. Sometime in the late 60s, it was already playing checkers better than any human. And so, we continue to, set the bar higher and higher for what it takes for something to be considered artificial intelligence. I tend to be fairly open-minded about what qualifies. So, checkers, chess, and so forth. Those all really fall into the category of narrow intelligence. It's really only doing one thing well. It's not general purpose intelligence. And artificial general intelligence is, the kind of things you see like C-3PO in the movies, where they can converse, they can be creative, they're mobile and active agents in the world. There are people working on that. That really isn't something that exists today. And, as a project person working in, industry or government or whatever, you're much more likely to be working on, how can I solve this one narrow problem using artificial intelligence?
Okay. So, and that brings us to the idea of, when project managers get a chance to help shape a project in the beginning. And, one of the first things we always talk about is make sure that you're clear on the project you're trying to solve. And in fact, it just happened, oddly enough, last week, where I was working with a client and he said that one of the business leaders said that he wanted to do an AI project. I'm like, but why? What's the problem he's trying to solve? I don't help me understand the problem you're trying to solve first. And then we can decide if AI is a good option to help solve that problem. So, John, help us understand some clues, right? So when this guy comes back to us and says, this is his problem, how do I know whether or not AI is going to actually help him solve his problem?
I find looking at the process rather than the problem is a really valuable way of determining not only whether there's a fit, but what that might look like.
So what do you mean by that? Tell us more. Yeah.
So I learned very early on that projects tend to be successful, and not successful in the narrow sense of on time, on budget, but successful in terms of having a business impact, once they're up and running and operational, when they change the way that people work, when they change the way that the company or the organization does its business. So, sometimes it can be fairly simple where it removes a lot of time from the process. And that can either mean you're more responsive to customers quickly, or that you can do more in a given fixed period of time than you could in the past. But in other cases, you're actually making the process different. You're allowing for higher quality to be incorporated at a lower cost, for example, as the ultimate goal. And it's in that changing of business process that you open up new opportunities. One of them is simply saving money, but others are, being able to tackle new markets. We once worked, on a project where we were helping simulate what the company would look like in the future by taking the past data and projecting it forward. And what we discovered was that if you could do that quickly enough, it could change the way that they planned the business. It wasn't just people sitting around filling out spreadsheets as to what they think they're going to do next year. It could mean that you could use these projections to see if the plans that the people are doing manually make sense.
Wow. So this is budget cycle season for some folks, right? And right now, and most people hate budget cycle season, right?
Yes, they do.
So I think many people would welcome this. And if it streamlined the budget process, not that we would have the machines make all the decisions, but that we would have, an alternate universe where maybe it weren't so painful.
Right. And when you look at that budget process, for example, and by the way, I can't believe we're talking about budgeting. That's one of the least exciting topics in the world. But when you look at that process, a lot of work goes into determining whether the budget makes any sense at all.
Right.
Because you've got the salespeople doing their projections, and you've got the operations people talking about what it'll take to meet those sales objectives. And how do you, if you could just automatically say, based on history, that many people producing that much stuff, selling at this price will generate, that we can do that we can produce the amount that the salesmen claim they're going to sell at the cost structure that that makes us profitable and so forth, instead of having to do all of that manually, just having the computer automatically check all that stuff and say, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Or historically, and I'm going to pick on the salespeople for a moment, historically, these three regions have done a really good job of forecasting, but these guys are over here are always way too optimistic. So flag that so that the people in financial analysis can say, wow, let's revisit those numbers with the people whose numbers actually need to be revisited. And in very large organizations, doing that manually is time consuming.
Yeah, and painful. And it's very
painful.
It takes many, many cycles. So let's talk about something more exciting than the budget process then. I mean, tell us about some cool stuff that you're excited about in the AI world.
So we'll talk a little bit more about natural language processing in a few minutes. But one of the things that I'm excited about is, and this is going to sound weird, right, is the recent focus on the bias that's built into systems, and not just AI systems, but systems generally. And I think that that has really helped bring a number of issues to the fore. An example is in resume processing. So, it's interesting how, as we've become a more remote workforce and companies have embraced remote work, LinkedIn has really brought the whole world together from a business basis. When a job is opening, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you actually would create a printed resume and fold it up, put it in an envelope, lick a stamp, and send it to a company. There were very few resumes to go through on a daily basis for the HR organization.
Right.
Today, you post something to LinkedIn, it's not unusual to have hundreds or even thousands of responses to that.
Yeah, and you didn't put photos there was no photo associated with your resume in those days.
That's right.
So people could infer as best they could based on your name, maybe, about, your gender and your background, but otherwise they were blind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And HR people are now trying to filter all of those resumes, mostly using keywords. But AI has been used to analyze not only the resumes themselves, but the responses to those resumes, and to see which ones are being picked up by HR and moved through the process and which ones aren't. And, one of the interesting discoveries is that, everything being the same, except for the names, Dawn.
Right.
They get, depending on whether it's a male or female or, an identifiable ethnic group versus a different identifiable ethnic group based on the name, the degree to which those resumes get responses is very different. So, AI can help identify qualified candidates without taking those things into account.
Exactly. Yeah.
However, it takes effort. And I think this is when one of the things I wanted to talk about was some of the additional risks of AI projects.
Yeah, great. Let's move on to that.
This is one where, if your database is biased towards certain candidates, then you're going to get the wrong candidate set. For example, if you have a rule in your system, implicitly or explicitly, that activity on certain GitHub projects is an indicator of strength for a programmer, there are implied biases there towards certain demographic groups.
Wow. So I mean, the thing is though, right, I was a programmer, right, back in the day, and I learned programming, and what I learned really quickly is that you tell the computer what to do, right?
That's
you're, as the programmer, right, you're the one that has to tell the computer what to do, and it does what you tell it. And if you don't do that right, it still does what you tell it to do.
Yes. Right.
So the people behind, whatever the AI is that's doing these filters and whatever, like they need to be intelligent about what they're telling the machine to do, right? Because even though in the movies we see, we've seen C-3PO since I was a little girl, right? And going to Star Wars for the first time with my dad, dropping all the popcorn, right? All that stuff. Yep. And now, we got Will Smith, right? Dealing with robots. So, but it's not there yet where the robots think for themselves.
No. And where it is, I don't know if many of you remember Microsoft's infamous Twitter bot experiment.
Tell us. No, I'm not sure where you're going with this.
Microsoft created an AI Twitter bot that was going to engage with folks on Twitter, and it would learn from its Twitter conversations, how to engage with other people. And within just a couple of days, it became a Nazi. And
what? I didn't know that.
It's an amazing story.
I'm gonna have to
written about when they launched it last decade, and they had to shut it down. So when you go with a pure machine learning intelligence, for lack of a better word, and put that out there, you have to realize that you're putting it into a context. And that context that's being put into is not necessarily going to be, uplifting, positive, rational, and open-minded.
Okay.
And it will learn from its environment. And if you put it into an environment where inflammatory rhetoric is rewarded, it will respond with inflammatory rhetoric.
This is so interesting. What a wild example.
It's a wild example, but it shows up in a number of other places where it's a little bit less wild, like in the resume searching databases, where, by virtue of looking for certain schools so it learns like that we like, because you have to train this on data, right? You have to take some set of data and say, these are candidates we like, these are candidates we don't like. And then it uses that and to decide which candidates to give you. Now, the reality of how most companies hire today is that they never actually do an experiment. They never actually test to see if their hiring is correct, the old way or the new way. Nobody ever hires somebody that they would ever not hire to see if maybe they're excluding qualified candidates.
That's a great point.
So your data set is going to be skewed towards people who have both been, you've already eliminated a pool of people who could be great talent, but you never hired them. So you're never going to see those people in your data set as good hires. And the people you have hired may have been hired with bias, right? Hey, we only hire people who went to these schools, or we only, hire people who, are hard driving, blazers and all of that kind of craziness, right? So you may be missing out when you set up your training set on having the right criteria implicitly in the data that you can't even see, and then you tell the machine to look for it. So, but let's step back for a second and talk about, how these things happen, right? And I think when you're setting up an AI project, your personnel are really critical, because, there's this notion that there are gods and goddesses of data science and machine learning, and that's not true. I've never come across one of those people who knows business and, all the latest algorithms and knows how to massage data in Spark and all the other technology platforms who
there's just too much to know.
There's too much to know. So you need to have complementary skills of multiple people on a team.
Okay.
Right?
Good.
The other thing that's tricky is your sponsors and your stakeholders. Do they really understand what this means and why you're using it? And having to educate them, and not like send them to a machine learning class, but help them understand that, what we're doing here is automating things that used to be done by people in their heads. And this is why it's going to change how we work and therefore have an economic impact, either, increase revenue, decrease costs, or reduce risk for the organization.
So, and it sounds like, based on what you were explaining, with the bias and some of these great examples, it sounds like risk management is even more important for us project leaders to put around an AI project, probably more so than other technology projects. What do you think about that?
I think the risks of AI are additive. And by the way, we do have a question, which I will get to in a moment.
Okay.
But I want to continue this line of thought. So you still have all the regular risks of a software project,
Mhm.
right? Those don't go away because you're using AI. In
Sure.
fact, they're compounded. And I'm just going to quickly identify a couple others that are really important in an AI project, and then we'll get to Peter's question. The issues around stakeholders and such we've touched on, and I don't want to belabor that, but I could. Data, whether you're going with a pure expert system, a pure machine learning system, or a hybrid, getting the expertise there is hard. And by expertise, I mean, in the case of data collection is really hard. You need a lot of data, and it needs to be good data, clean data. Google is successful because they have so much of it.
Mhm.
It's very hard for most organizations to have enough data to train machine learning models, and for that data to be clean enough to create a good model. And you're going to spend a lot more time on data and data cleansing than you would ever have wanted to.
Yeah, and
Likewise,
that's always been a sticking point for projects is data anyway. So this is like
absolutely, this just
on
makes
steroids, right?
exactly. And if you're doing expert systems, you not only need to have the experts, but you need to have people who know how to translate expertise into algorithms.
So you just started to talk about people. So I want to move on to that, right? Because this is a really hot
Yeah.
topic. Is, number 5, will AI put people out of work? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, it will. And I think this is nothing new.
Correct.
Right? I mean, many robots on factory floors.
And let's go the whole way back to France in the what, 1700s?
Sure, the rise of textile mills, and Dawn and I were talking about the word sabotage, which actually comes from the wooden shoes, sabots, that the workers who had been put out of work would throw into the equipment to destroy it so that they could get their jobs back.
Yeah, so this, like you said, this is nothing new. So people get all freaked out and scared about it, right?
But I think that there's something interesting going on here that is still important, and it's not just unique to AI. So if you're looking at this project you're on, and you are aware that you've got, say, 10 loan processors, and the AI is going to take away 30% of the work. Now that means 3 people are going to have to be redeployed. And the challenge is, what do you do with those 3 people who need to be redeployed? And Dawn, last year when we were talking about Projectland in a different context, we were talking about how project management is being a career step for technical women who want to do more or do something different with the skills that they have.
Right, because we were speaking at a women's conference, so we were very focused on that at the time. Yeah.
But I also think that as project managers looking to take the next step up the ladder, or transversal or whatever, I hate to think of them as hierarchical, because you may not want to be an executive, and just being great at projects is a great career path. But
amen.
If you start thinking about the business more broadly, right? We now have 3 people who know our company, are integrated into the culture, know our customers, and is there something that they can contribute to our organization outside of their current role in loan processing?
Exactly. And we've been seeing that. I've been seeing that my whole career. So if a company is growing, many projects that I've worked on, when a company is growing, the point has been to get some things automated so that we could give people different opportunities so they could grow and help the company continue to grow, which is what's super exciting for.
And in an era where, and I would argue that if the company is not growing, here's an opportunity for you to create a new group that could help the company grow.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to take, and this is a mistake I think a lot of companies make. You don't have to take your lowest performing loan processors. You can take your highest performing loan processors and put them into a new role
Exactly.
and have them do something really different that really moves the company forward.
Exactly. And that's what I had. That's what I was seeing 20 years ago,
right. And
with those projects.
And if you are a project manager going to your business sponsors and talking to them about these kinds of dynamics, hey, these are the three people who really know what they're doing. And, is there an opportunity for us to leverage them in a new role in the organization? You're going to be seen as someone who's not just thinking about the project narrowly, but thinking about the business more broadly.
Absolutely.
And that's something that you as a project manager can bring to the table that adds value. It has ethical content and it helps you in your career. So, I'd strongly recommend thinking when you're automating things, not only what effect will it have on the process, but for the people in that process, what can we do differently to help the whole organization grow?
So let's get to the next question, which I am super excited, and then we'll take questions here at the end from our folks. So tell us about the exciting disruptive AI project you're working on now, John.
Okay. So long story short, partner and I saw an opportunity in that world of helping people develop skills that can help them take on these new roles. And one of the things that AI is doing is taking away the routine and making the jobs that are left more creative, more collaborative, more unstructured. And that makes interpersonal skills a lot more important in the workplace. And so we've developed an app that helps people develop their interpersonal skills by interacting with virtual characters and then getting feedback on your interactions a lot more important in the workplace. And so we've developed an app that helps people develop their interpersonal skills by interacting with virtual characters and then getting feedback on your interpersonal interactions a lot more important. Okay. So you get feedback on your interactions from an AI that analyzes your interaction, not just your, pace and keywords, but are you saying things that have appropriate meaning in the context of the conversation that you're having in the workplace? And we're just getting started. We're in market. We've got some customers, and it's a very exciting time to be, working in AI and, finding areas where, we can make a difference. And to the question about, who are we putting out of work with this project? We're trying to put no one out of work. We're trying to give coaching opportunities to people who would never have had them otherwise, because the cost of having a human coach is just out of reach for most professionals. So
yeah, absolutely. And what I love about, luckily I've had the chance to get inside the John's new tool and test it. And one of the things I absolutely love about it is that it's not as stressful as leadership coaching. So in my past life in the Fortune 500, we got, the leadership coaches, right? And we had to be in a room and we had to learn how to do soft skills training with each other. And it was a pretty stressful environment. But what's great about that, you're using this tool and it's a machine that's not judging you, it's helping you. It's not going to run around and stab you in the back later, right? It's actually helping you develop your skills. So I just am so excited to see where this goes. And I'm excited about some of the things we're talking about working on together, John.
Yep, that's great. So Peter Canino asked a question about IBM Watson. Is that a good example of AI? Watson was originally built to play Jeopardy. And it
Jeopardy,
right? Remember?
Okay, I remember Alex, and I remember he had all the answers and was pretty smug about it. That's what I remember. So I didn't realize that Watson was actually trying to beat Alex. That's awesome.
Watson beat all of the best champions of its time.
No
Ken
kidding.
Jennings, and Brad Rutter, I believe. And it was designed to play Jeopardy. And it was a good example of an expert system. It's really a hybrid, but it had a coded semantic net that meshed together all of what we might call, encyclopedia type knowledge. Napoleon's nickname and, what's the largest lake in Australia and that sort of thing.
John, you just mentioned Napoleon, and we actually have, I see the author of Napoleon on Project Management in the audience right now.
Okay, that's great.
That's pretty amazing that you did that. So maybe
so let me just finish answering Peter. As an intelligence playing Jeopardy, it was a brilliant AI. It was a really good example of how semantic nets can capture relationships amongst entities, lakes, rivers, countries, and so forth, and spreading out from there. What's interesting about Watson was that IBM tried to take the technology and move it into other domains. And they really struggled, and they recently basically gave up on the medical profession as a place for using the AI. And this is going to sound a little controversial maybe, but when you look at successful deployments of AI in the world today, the vast majority of them, there are exceptions, but the vast majority of them have one of two characteristics. They are either in what I might call low stakes environments, where if it makes a mistake, like on Jeopardy, it's not a big deal. Or there's a human working alongside it, to make it better and ensure that mistakes aren't made.
So life and death complex decisions might not be the best way to go yet.
Exactly. And so, and in the medical profession in particular, right, it's not only life and death, but you have a lot of practitioners who are understandably skeptical about technology. And so, it'd be interesting to know if there were other fields where I don't know all of the internals of IBM. I do know that IBM has a very active program for predictive maintenance of machinery using IoT and AI to monitor industrial equipment and identify patterns where they're likely to fail in the near future.
IoT meaning Internet of Things, yeah.
Yes, excuse me.
That's okay.
And I think that's like a really good example of something where it's a less high risk, right? Because there's not an expectation that it's going to nail it every time. And a few false positives aren't so bad either. We checked out the machine and it's actually okay.
And humans can work alongside.
And humans get into the loop to make sure that, take a look at the machinery and see what's really going on. So, from a project manager or product manager perspective, it's really a question of not only does this AI work, because the IBM Watson technology is amazing. And I do think that the work they did in semantic nets is going to, continue to grow and be used in other places. I mean, Google uses that same kind of technology a lot in their search engine. You've got to make sure you're applying the technology in a way that works. And this goes back to the risk. I mean, depending on whose research you read, McKinsey or whomever, 80% or more of AI projects fail. I think that number is a little bit high, but whatever it is, it's high. It's high for a lot of software projects in general. Yes. And I think that's a recognition that this is largely still, there's a lot of research that goes into these projects, that are often presented as development. You're going in and you're saying, we're going to use AI to solve problem X. Well, you don't actually know how to solve problem X yet. So it's not an engineering exercise yet. It's a research project. Do we have the right data? You run the algorithms, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Then what do you do?
Yeah, and that from a project management standpoint, the key thing is to make sure that you are trying to set yourself up for success, meaning setting the expectations in the beginning. So if you set the expectation in the beginning that, okay, we're going to test this hypothesis. This is what we're going to do to test this hypothesis, that if AI is going to do the trick or not. And then, and we're going to give you a report with the findings at the end and let you know what we think. That's a different thing than saying, yes, absolutely, AI is the answer, or AI is going to, right? So a lot of it is about the expectation setting, like any project in the beginning.
And, there is this dynamic. HP did a big study of all their projects back in the 80s. And it turned out that no project was ever predicted to run for more than 24 months. Even the ones that ran 48 months were originally told to be running 24. And it turned out that management would never approve a project funded for more than 24 months. So everybody just adjusted their prediction for their pet projects to say it would be 24 months, knowing that by the time you were 24 months in, management would fall for the sunken cost fallacy and continue funding it.
So they gamed the system more than
they gamed the system. And, I think there's a risk of that in these kinds of projects where dynamic you described, right? Hey, we're going to do some research and we're going to come back in 5 months with some results and we'll let you know whether this is feasible or not. They'll just say no. Then what do you say? Right? One way is to say, come back 3 weeks later. We figured out a way to ensure that we have results in 5 months,
there's not a lot of, this is the thing about innovation, right? If you have a company or organization that embraces innovation and realizes that, there are not every hypothesis, not every project is going to turn into, the next big thing. That's the purpose of innovation, is to try things and work through some of these types of discoveries, right?
Right. And there are also vendors out there that are now selling AI models that you can reuse. So, I was talking about loan processing. It turns out that there are actually companies out there that have huge machine learning models that have analyzed hundreds of thousands of loan applications. And you can use their models to analyze your own loan applications. So as a project manager, you don't necessarily, in all cases, have to take on the risk of building these models yourself. Over time, you will be able to go to third parties and sort of pick and choose the models that make sense for your business and significantly reduce the risk. Of course, you introduce vendor risk and all that other stuff, but that's
and time, that would be a huge time saver as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. In many cases, this would make a lot more sense, especially if you're not a company that specializes in those kinds of technologies.
Correct.
I wouldn't want to try and sell models to Google, but selling them to a mid-tier manufacturer, absolutely.
Yeah, except for your next big thing, that one,
right?
You're gonna want it. That's right.
Everybody's gonna want it. That's right.
Well, that's right. And so everybody, stay tuned for more as we update. But please follow Interflexion because there's going to be more to come about John's incredibly exciting project. Hopefully, I'll get to work with him on some new stuff. And if you are a PMP, you just earned, and we went over because I'm always so excited to talk to you, John, and you had so much to share. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So if you're a PMP, you can claim 0.75 for the 45 minutes of content we had here today, PDUs in the strategic and business management area, because this is all about context and the environment and the world that we're in today. So that's why I'm suggesting strategic and business management for today's PDU set. And I want you to please, please, please join us for future events like this one, and check out the replays of our last guests. So we had Dave Lozinger on change management, our resident naval fighter pilot, a former fighter pilot who's a change management and project change expert. We also talked with international man of mystery, Hans Meyer, about emotional intelligence in Projectland. So check those videos out on the Project Guru Academy page as well. This replay will be available very, very soon. So if you didn't catch all of it, you can catch the remainder in the replay, and you can share it so that others can find out more about AI in Projectland from our expert, John Hack. Please join us for future events as well. We've got lots of fun stuff coming up at the Academy, and also my Smart Tips course from Udemy. If you have Udemy Business in your organization, you can get it for free. If you don't, let me know, and I will be happy to send you my special referral link so that you can get it from me. So thank you, John. We'll close it out for today. Happy Friday to everyone. Thanks everybody for participating from Philly, from Colombia, South America, from all over the place. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll close it out for now. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
You too, Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you.